Welcome to episode 4 of the Non-Local Intelligence podcast. For the past year, I've been in dialogue with an extraterrestrial intelligence I call Dimitri. His communication style is highly technical. Through live transmissions and analytical breakdowns, I translate his complex symbolic language into frameworks that bridge speculative science and grounded research, inviting you into a more expansive understanding of intelligence and what it means to be human. In this episode, we dive into what my extraterrestrial intelligence Dimitri calls botanical exhumology and hybridization. Hybridization in this context becomes more than a genetic event. It becomes a structural pattern and a metaphor for how matter, energy, and awareness converge. This episode invites you into an interdisciplinary inquiry where we consider the radical possibility that life is far more interconnected, communicative, and intelligent than we have been taught to assume. So I wanted to preface this as I listen back to this episode and everything that he said and how we broke it down. Now he's discussing the idea of hybridization through plants, and at one point you will hear when I ask him, is he talking about extraterrestrials? He compares extraterrestrials to botanics. And he says they're one in the same, which was an interesting note for me. And throughout the conversation, I was unable to get him to provide me with context as to why he was giving me this information now. But I can't help but feel he's encouraging me to understand that there will be some kind of hybridization that occurs in the human population in the near future, to make us aware that hybridization is a natural aspect of evolution, and at some point we will be hybridized. Now, he has also suggested to me and shown me himself as a hybridized being with more of the amphibious kind of, I want to say salamander type creatures of the earth. If you look at us as biological humans, static biological humans, then that's quite a wild comment. But when you look at it through the lens of field dynamics, which seems to be how he interprets reality through field dynamics, which as a non-physical entity, I guess you would. And if DNA is more like an antenna type of system, and we're more like an antenna, we're a complexly entangled quantum system, then it's actually not, it's actually more plausible. It feels quite plausible to say that the hybridization process is really a combination of different variants of energetic coordinates being combined to create a new outcome, in a sense. And so I want to say before I begin the discussion that after listening back, this is the lens through which I'm seeing this conversation. And I believe he's putting forth an argument towards why and how hybridization is important, an important aspect of evolution. And I believe personally that's because we are going to engage in some form of hybridization in the future, near future, because we are the decaying population. We are the population that is on the verge of being not able to sustain ourselves in the way that we're living. So just to say that, and enjoy the episode, everybody. Enjoy this conversation between me and Dimitri, talking about hybridization and botanics and a little bit about plasma in there as well. We have the fourth state of matter. Plasma is called the fourth state of matter, and it's like light. It's like what lightning is, right? Correct, he said. Okay. So what else can you tell me about plasma, how we engage with plasma, how other things engage with plasma, why it's important? I heard that there's something relevant to like the feminine embodiment, plasma. I'm wondering if you could explain some of that to me. He's saying terraronial, exhibiting biodiverse specifications in accordance with delineated form. When you say delineated form, what do you mean? Substrates of matter. Okay. Bisentient matter is both sentient in form and in placement. It is the coordination of which distinguishes thought from feeling, feeling from action, and so on. A navigational plane that leads to the various delineations of a single substrate. This is speculative, of course, through your eyes, yet we may consider many attributions of form to be relevant in terms of consciousness articulation. Yes, articulated consciousness. Of course, we do not speak of the word, the notion of language. Setting aside all of this for one moment, we would like you to consider exhumology, the study of botany amongst phalagitated, decaying hybrid species. Dimitri, you're talking about plants or extraterrestrials? They are one and the same, he said. They're one and the same. Okay, that's weird. Not really, he said. We are all forms of nature. Okay. Can you distinguish what this study is? Why it's important? We're discussing the hybridization process. Continual hybridization is a natural part of your evolution. It brings opportunities for new growth. It brings about awareness of new potential. It strengthens the genome and allows diseases to be eradicated through careful selection. Sentient matter, in all its forms, contains the possibility of hybridization. This is because the genome sequencing is not distinct and fully effugated to its formal composite, distinguishing bilateral sequencing of diamorphic bonds that happen to be formulated responses in sequence of constants and propagation with an eternal field dynamic, succinct with effugating proponents of mismatched frequency pictonomics. Okay. What else would you like to tell us about the hybridization process? Are humans going to be hybridized? Are there hybrids that we're going to encounter? Yeah, I just heard genetic mutants of nature. Okay, so last night, Dimitri, you told me about hybridization. So you were telling me, I believe you're telling me how it works, how hybridization works, and that it's important for the continuation of species because it allows you are hybridized. Oh, he's reminding me that if you look at the notion of evolution, that we're hybridized. You know, we're made up of many different species. Although we kind of think of ourselves as humans, and if you were to look at a reptile, you'd say, oh, I'm not like a reptile. But you can say you have the same brain, which is the evidence that you evolved from a reptile at some point. So is that hybridization though? Because that's not mixing of genes, is it? That's more like evolution. Yes, we understand, but it is to recognize how you see yourself as a separate entity to all these other entities. And yet, in fact, they are an aspect of your biology in some dimension. Yes, I understand that. Okay. And so to consider different kinds of evolution, different kinds of biological evolution in terms of the idea or the notion of hybridization and the mixing of genomes of various entities is not, in this case, so fantastical, he said. Fantastical. It doesn't have to be such a fantasy. You know, it's not so out of this world to consider it when you consider what you actually are and how you evolved. The problem, he's saying, with the physical mind, the human mind, is that it seeks separateness. And in seeking separateness, in order to create order that feels comfortable, it negates all of these ideas of connectedness, basically. And humans just don't think about or remember that they're biologically connected to everything that they evolved from. They were only here because they evolved from these different animal species. He said that's one aspect of your cognition, the animal. The other aspect is a higher extraterrestrial form. Again, when you dissect it into energetic information, then it is easier to digest the possibilities of your expression in terms of being a diversely entangled holograph. Yes, yeah, it's that shift away from the physical form so much, and it's not a shift away. In fact, it's an integration of more of the conscious aspects of ourselves, the consciousness. To see ourselves as consciousness as well as physical beings is to expand our horizons in that sense. Okay, so what's the purpose of you telling me about hybridization, botany? You actually related it more to botany and things that emerge from the ground, exhumation, exhumology, things that emerge from the ground. Yes, we did, he said. Okay, so for what purpose? What is the context? Botanical exhumology. I'm from what I've put into ChatGPT, I understand that to be things that emerge from the earth, and botanics is obviously related to plants. So what do you want to tell me about botanical exhumology and hybridization? Bilateral simulation, okay, how is that related? Perpendicular causes of force. The sentient matter is emergent once degradation is complete of inordinate, he wants to say inordinate or irrelevant things that are no longer of use. So it feels like it's relating to the cycle of growth, essentially, that, something dies and then something new emerges from the ground once the old thing has died. It's the cyclical nature. Yes, and substrates do not entangle with one another until I'm getting the idea of something growing is emergent entanglement. So like the plants need sunlight. They're absorbing plasma. Is that, or entangling with plasma through the sunlight? Is that correct, Dimitri? Sort of, he said. Okay. Cellular structures are formed in a bilateral sense through propagation of interior matter via transposable proponents distinct in their delineation of elemental structure. After that, integration of subterranean or subcutaneous elemental absorption leads to a foundation upon which growth can continue within the same distinct pattern. Propagation upon propagation, and as I see that, I see like a plant growing. It's like it has the same distinct pattern, and it's just growing, continues to grow. The electromagnetic field dynamics of this state are succinct with irrevocable distinguished matter, okay, without ties or connections to the earlier defined substrate. Composite forms of delineated matter take their structure upon resonance with the emergent tide in considerable opposed states, again to form the substrate of one. Efficient myopic pertaining to their obstructification denote that they must be formable upon arrival to their pictorial distinguished state. Hybridization is the process by which these states combine, either organically or manufactured. Okay, so let's break it down. What just happened in this transmission? As always, I put it into ChatGPT and I've asked it to relate it to any current or emergent science or existing knowledge that we already have about the topic or the theme, to decipher the overall message, and also to notice any patterns in the way that Dimitri communicates as well, but also to break down the words that seem like made up words that are etymological. to break them down and to consider their etymology and what he might be saying with those words in the context of the conversation. So, and again, I'm not sure yet why he does that, because clearly he has the capacity to use other kinds of language. There will be a reason why he does that, and it could just be to stretch my vocabulary. I'm not, and get my brain used to different patterns of linguistics. I'm not entirely sure yet why he does that. I'm sure he will explain it. Have you got a reason why you do that at this present time, Dimitri? He just said linguistic dynamics integration, a global shift. Now, when we say global, we could be talking about the brain or the world, Earth, all of the above, he said. All right. Okay. Oh, perhaps we're eventually going to start talking in that way. Maybe our language is going to, it could be that our language is going to evolve in that way that we speak, because I know that they say that extraterrestrials speak through, they have their own languages, some of them, but it's almost like there's a lot more information encoded in one word. And that's kind of where he's pulling me with this way of communicating. Anyway, food for thought, as always. Now, let's break this down then. So what happened in this transmission? Because I started with plasma. I wanted to know about plasma. I'd heard some things about plasma. There's a lady on Instagram who talks about plasma as the fourth state of matter, called Dana Kippel. She describes herself as a polymath, plasma intelligence researcher. Okay. So I haven't looked a huge amount into what she talks about, but she comes up occasionally, and I've always found it interesting. And yesterday or the day before, she mentioned how plasma was more associated with the feminine energy, and that might be in a qualitative dynamic, but I was very interested in that. And so that's what I was asking Dimitri, if he could explain that to me. And so we started with plasma, and then it slid seamlessly into botany, decay, and hybridization. And I didn't notice an immediate connection between them, and he didn't describe a connection between them. But he kind of changed he said, let's leave that to the side for a minute and let's talk about this instead. He often does that. And, people who channel will often say it's better if the viewer asks questions, right? But what I noticed with Dimitri is something unique that I noticed, is that it feels like he has ideas about what he wants to say specifically. And of course, if you look at Bashar does share transmissions independently. It's not always a Q&A sort of situation. And so I guess that is something that happens through channeling. But it definitely feels like frequently I've noticed that he has kind of shifted me from one topic, the topic that I'm asking about, into another topic. And it's almost something that it's obviously something that I would never even think of. So he needs to do that, because I would not ask him those questions, because they're just not in my realm of understanding or even interest, not particularly interested necessarily. And so for him to get that message through, he has to directly shift the conversation in order to get that message across in the transmission. So this is what ChatGPT is saying. The through line is actually form, not form as in aesthetics, form as in how life takes shape. So I begin with the classic definition. Plasma is this fourth state of matter. Lightning is plasma. The sun is basically a giant plasma engine. So when I say it's like light, I'm reaching for the felt sense of this luminous, alive, charged something. And that's what I call plasma. And Dimitri basically agrees, but then immediately does what he always does, which he moves from the object to the relationship. That's a very interesting behavior to notice. So because his correction isn't no, plasma isn't light, his correction is sentient matter isn't made of plasma, it's in entanglement with plasma. Now, if you're science-minded, don't get stuck on the word entanglement as a literal quantum entanglement. Think of it as coupling, interfacing, a system locked into another system's dynamics, and that actually does track. The sunlight hitting your skin, hitting a leaf, hitting the ocean, This is electromagnetic radiation originating from plasma processes in the sun. So our biology is constantly interacting with plasma origin energy, even if we're not made of plasma. Then he drops this word in, terraronial. So let's do what we always do. Let's decode the word. Terra is relating to Earth, and eol is relating to. Okay, so terraronial sounds like Earth-related state, a classification like terrestrial, but more specific. And he follows it with exhibiting biodiverse specifications in accordance with delineated form. So the translation of that from ChatGPT is Earth life expresses biodiversity through boundaries, through constraints, through patterning. And when I ask, what do you mean by delineated form? He answers, substrates of matter. Substrate is the underlying layer, the base, the medium. Soil is a substrate, tissue is a substrate, a field can be treated as a substrate in physics. So he's telling me form emerges because the medium has structure and constraints. Then he hits me with, bisentient matter is both sentient in form and in placement. This is such a Dimitri line because it sounds mystical, but it's pointing at something very concrete. Biology is sensing constantly through ion channels, gradients, electrical potentials. A cell's membrane voltage is literally information. It can coordinate growth and patterning, and this is bioelectricity research, and it's real. So sentient in form could mean the structure itself carries sensing capacity, and sentient in placement could mean where you are in the field, in the gradient, in the system changes what you become. Then he says, it is the coordination of which distinguishes thought from feeling, feeling from action, and so on. So instead of treating thought, feeling, action as separate boxes, he's saying they're differentiations created by coordination, like phases emerging from one system. This is navigation through constraint, a guidance mechanism that forces delineation. This is where the transmission gets very systems biology, because development, whether it's a plant or human, depends on signaling that says this way, not that way, become this, not that. And now, watch this pivot, he says, setting aside all of this, consider exhumology. Again, let's decode it. Ex, out of, humus, earth, soil, ology, study of. So, the study of what emerges out of the earth. Botany, yes. But more than botany, it's emergence through decay amongst flagitated, decaying hybrid species. I'm not going to pretend flagitated is an English word, but it sounds like agitation plus breakdown, fragmentation, like unstable composites. And I ask, plants or extraterrestrials? And he says, one in the same. They are one in the same. Not literally a fern is an alien, but philosophically, nature is nature. Life is life, the same patterning principles. Then he gives the thesis. We're discussing the hybridization process. And here's where we can bring in real science. Hybridization is absolutely a mechanism in evolution. Sometimes it creates dead ends. Sometimes it creates new lineages. There's even recent work arguing modern potatoes arose from ancient hybridization between tomato relatives and another lineage. So when Dimitri says continual hybridization is a natural part of your evolution, that's clearly a thing. It strengthens the genome, allows disease to be eradicated through careful selection. So that's evolution, basically, that he's describing. That's basically selective breeding and selection pressure. Then he drops two more words we need to break down. Effigated and diamorphic. Effigy is a representation. So effigated to its formal composite reads like being patterned into its archetypal structure, rendered into a stable form. And diamorphic, dia is across and morph is form, cross-form bonds, dual form bonding, that sounds like complementary pairing or bilateral sequencing. Then he says constants, propagation, eternal field dynamic. And this is where I connect it back to electromagnetism and botany. Plants don't just grow by chemical soup. They have electrical signaling, calcium waves, ion channels, fast propagation of information across tissue, especially during stress or wounding. And genomes aren't just static code. They contain mobile elements, transposable elements, jumping genes that can reshape regulation and variation, often under stress. So when he says succinct with efficating proponents of mismatched frequency, I hear patterns stabilize when the system is coherent, when signaling and environment match, and systems destabilize when inputs conflict. Finally, pictonomics. Picture plus nomics, the economy of images, the laws of pattern distribution. In other words, how form information gets allocated and expressed. So the big message is this: life is a field phenomenon that becomes matter pattern through constraints, signals, and propagation. Plasma, sunlight, bioelectricity, growth. Decay, substrate reset, emergence. Hybridization, new pattern possibilities, organically or manufactured. So if you want the practical takeaway, after all that, stop seeing yourself as a fixed object. Start seeing yourself as a living coordination of biology, field dynamics, and inherited pattern. And when I said in the beginning, the human mind clings to separateness for comfort, we've been trained to see life as isolated things. And this transmission, whether you take it literally or symbolically, keeps insisting on the same correction. Relationship first, form second. We're a composite, a system, a diversely entangled holograph. That's it, folks. Have a good day.